Okay, so I will start this third lecture on the mean field game, and I will mostly devote it to mean field control, actually, instead of mean field game. But before that, I will come back to mean field game to recall a little bit what we said last time, yesterday, and to say a few additional things. So let me finish this second part on mean field game by recalling that the mean field game, the type of mean field game we are looking at, which is a problem in finite horizon. And for simplicity, we assume that we have just a running cost and no terminal cost. So the dynamics of a typical player the state of which is denoted by x is dtx. So let me remind you that this is an element of Rd, in my notation of yesterday, and there is a drift which is controlled. So alpha t, so this is the state, alpha t is the control, and there is a parameter here which is mt, which is a flow of measure, which represents the flow of positions of the other players. Okay. So this is a continuous function on the space of coordination. Okay, and for the time being, this is fixed. So given mt, we solve the dynamics of a player is a stochastic differential equation driven by a d-dimensional Brownian motion Bd, okay, and with a drift which depends on the position of the player, on his control, and on the flow of measure at time t. Okay, so the map T gives M of T is just a continuous map, deterministic here in the setting we are discussing. And the cost of a typical player which depends on alpha. Okay, and as most of the time I forgot the initial condition here. So I've got an initial condition which I denote by z, which is a random variable on Rd. Okay. So this is random, it's an element of Rd, and by assumption I will always assume that it has enough finite moment, first order moment, let's say. So given a control, I've got a unique solution to that stochastic differential equation. And the cost of a typical player, to fix the IDs, is the expectation of an integral of a function L, which depends on the position, the control, and the measure. Okay. So, and what is a mean field equilibrium? It's a control which given mt minimize the quantity alpha, okay, and the equilibrium condition is the fact that the law of x is equal to mt when the player plays optimally. Okay, so this translates the fact that you are in a Nash equilibrium. You're in Nash equilibrium in which the alpha optimal is the strategy played by all the players. Okay. So we saw yesterday that there was a PD formulation of the Nash equilibrium. Okay, which consisted in introducing the value function, okay, and writing the equation satisfied by the value function on the one hand, and on the other hand, the equation satisfied by the law MT, which is the Kolmogorov equation. So if I look at the value function U, which depends on time and space, okay, this is a solution of the heat equation, because there is just a Brownian motion here, okay, which accounts for this term, plus, as usual in control, a Hamiltonian, which is more or less the Legendre transform of L. And as L depends on MT, okay, you have the MT dependency, and B also. So this equation is in T and ZD. Okay, so I wrote it last time like that. Okay, so this is the Hamilton-Jacobi equation, which, in which the unknown is the function u, okay, and as you see, it depends on the flow of measure. On the other hand, to translate the fact that the flow of measure corresponds to the optimal, to the law of the optimal trajectory, okay, you can write the Kolmogorov equation. Computed at the optimal alpha. Okay, and there is an initial condition for the law of, sorry, there is an initial condition for M, which is just the law of Z here, and a terminal condition for U, which, because I choose to write a problem without terminal cost, is just 0, okay? And the alpha star of Tx, this is the argmax over A of minus L of X M, so the cost, minus du of Tx, scalars. Okay, and the same variable as here. Okay, and the H is just the max. So the max here, this is H. Okay, this function you can compute it by replacing du by p, okay, and this gives you a function of 3 variables x, p, and a. Okay, so this is a PD formulation of the problem, okay, and the interpretation of this formulation is the following. U is the value function of the optimal control problem, and which is solved assuming that MT is given, okay. And because this gives me the optimal feedback, which is alpha, okay, and because all players are alike except for the initial condition, okay, which is distributed according M naught. So the key point is that all players have the same goal, okay, but they don't have the same initial position. So they start they start from an initial condition which is distributed according to the law, to the probability M naught, okay, on RD. Because of that, they are heterogeneous, okay, they are not the same. But they play the same control in feedback form, that is, if they are at the same place, they should play the same thing, which is alpha star of T and X, okay? So if they are at time T and at position X, they should play the same thing, okay, which is this alpha, okay, which is the optimal feedback. And if all players do that, because their noise is independent, we say that they have idiosyncratic noise only, okay, their distribution follows an equation which is just the law of this stochastic differential equation, where one put here the optimal feedback. Okay. So we saw yesterday that this system has a solution which is not unique in general, except in short time, okay, but which can be unique under suitable Lasry-Lyons monotonicity condition. Okay. So I just want to say a few words first on another formulation of this same system in terms of stochastic process first, and then to explain a few extensions of this kind of problem. So I will choose one of the two possible probabilistic formulations. Which has been used intensively by Wang, Keynes, and Mallarmé, but also in a slightly more general context by Carbonat and Delarue. So the idea is to keep the forward-backward system. I forgot to say that, okay? So the Hamilton-Jacobi equation is backward with a terminal condition, okay? So U satisfies a terminal condition at capital T. So this is an equation which goes backward in time, while the Kolmogorov equation, the M solves an equation which is forward in time. And we're going to keep this structure in the probabilistic formulation, okay? The forward equation is completely transparent. It's written there, okay? So it's just the equation satisfied by xt. Okay, so it's another way to write the Kolmogorov equation. I mean, so it's again a system, okay, where you look for a process alpha star t, which is more or less the same as the one I wrote here, okay, and you have the law of xt. So I'm writing the Kolmogorov equation in this way, okay, and to write the value function, in fact, I'm replacing it by the cost, the value at time t along the optimal trajectory, so which can be written as a backward stochastic differential equation, yt. So now this guy is a value function, so it's a real number, okay, and it's given by minus L. And this one is an extra assumption, so an extra process. So now there are three unknowns, x, which is valued in RD, which represents the law of which is m of there, okay? Y, which is the value function along the optimal path, and z, which is in fact is the derivative of the value function. Okay, so it's a process in RD, okay, which ensures this equation, which is a backward in time because I need to write the condition. So for the initial condition for x naught is the same as usual, and for y, so since this is a value function, okay, at time terminal t, it's 0 because I put 0 as a terminal cost, okay? Okay, so this second equation, which represents the value function at time t, I'm going to write it down explicitly, okay, is a backward equation with terminal condition, and the zt here, okay, it's is made to ensure the stochastic differential equation to be adapted to the filtration generated by this, okay? So, well, most of you know that in this audience, and very often the mean field game equilibrium is written in this form, okay? So It's either written in PD terms of, or in terms of probabilistic formulation. So the link with the PD formulation is the fact that Yt is just U of t, x of t, along this optimal path. Okay, I forgot to say what is alpha star, I'll just come back in a moment. Okay, and Zt is nothing but the derivative. So I need to complete that with the alpha star, which is exactly the same. That's clear. Okay, so. This is our max of the same guy has here, except that this is along the flow. Yeah, it's okay. So this should be added to the system. So you have two different ways to write down exactly the same Nash equilibria, and if you look at Carmona's and Delarus' book, the notion of Nash equilibria, the Nash mean-field-game equilibria, is written in these terms, and not so much in these terms. So this was more for sake of completeness, and because you will see several talks involving this kind of probabilistic formulation instead of the PD one. So I'm almost over with the mean-field gain part of the theory, and I just want to explain now some extension and what we can do on mean-field gain. So, of course, I presented a particular example, finite horizon, one running cost, no terminal cost, but of course the problem, the mean-field gain problem can be extended to any classical optimal control problem. So for instance, Rosanna yesterday presented a problem in which you have exit time. Okay, you can do mean-field gain with exit time and so on. So different optimal control problems. And you know that there are really a huge number of possibilities of optimal control problem. The second extension we can do, and which is really often done, is the fact that the dependence, the interaction between the player can be not only through the distribution of position, but also through the distribution of controls. So this is what is called mean-field game of control. So meaning that, in fact, the distribution M might represent also a distribution of controls. So through the distribution of positions, as here, and controls. Okay. So for instance, if you look at, in math finance, if you look at a problem in which you have several traders which trade for an asset, okay, so the price of the asset might depend on the action made by the trader at each time. Okay, so for instance, this means that the price of the asset, so DPT, would be, if you have a finite number of traders, a function beta of the action of alpha t of each trader. Okay. Okay, so the price of the asset is evolving in time according to, so usually there is a P here, to an equation of this form, okay? And when you pass to the limit, you end up with an integral of the control of the players, okay? And this is what is called the midfield game of control. So in the end, players are not interacting through their position, but through their control. Okay? And in some sense, this is a problem which is slightly more difficult to handle than the midfield game, the standard midfield game, because the interaction with the control is more difficult, it's more unstable. And the last extension I want to mention is what happens when we keep the common noise. So I wrote the initial model with the common noise, which was impacting all the players. Okay, I removed it for simplicity, but clearly the presence of common noise is an important question, and how to handle midfield game with common noise. So there are plenty of possibilities. Let me point out two of them. So the first one is through the PD method, which is written here by the forward-backward system. So in this case, the forward-backward system becomes stochastic in the sense that the first equation becomes a backward stochastic differential Hamilton-Jacobi equation with involving the common noise, so it's adapted to the common noise, and you need to add an extra term which ensures this function u to be adapted to the common noise. Okay, and the same holds for the m, the solution m, which involves a derivative of m against the common noise for the second equation. So this is one way to do that. So this becomes a stochastic forward-backward midfield game system. Okay. So this is a stochastic MFG system. Still in PD terms, there is a way to lift this system into a deterministic quantity, which is called the value function of the problem, and which solves the master equations, which is an equation stated in the space of measure. So I'm not going to discuss that now, because I will present it in the case of midfield control, where it's slightly easier to understand. But you have also, and this is an alternative way to handle the problem, so by the master equation. Okay. And these two systems, we developed them with François Delarue, Jean-Michel Leslie, and Pierre Williams, and you can find that also in the book by Caronin Delarue. And the last approach, which is possible, is to look at the initial formulation in a strong sense that I wrote for the midfield game system, where you can add noise, okay, and write down explicitly what you want to have, adding the noise to the x of t, in which case the measure m of t is the conditional law of x of t given the common noise. Okay? So, okay, I think this, these two parts are probably the most active one, and there are plenty of works on both. Okay, if you, so I'll stop here on midfield game, and now I will start the part on midfield control. The reason why I'm doing midfield control is that it will allow me to come back to midfield game by introducing incentives in the end. So please, if you have any question, do not hesitate. So MFC, so mean field control. Okay, so this is a problem which pops up when we look at a global planner which minimize an optimal, which solves an optimal control problem in which you have plenty of controllers, okay, and the global planner says to the controller what they have to do. Okay, so we have seen yesterday that we end up with a problem that I'm going to write in a slightly more general setup. So you end up with a problem which is of the form very close to the one I wrote here. Okay, so it's you minimize over the control alpha of a quantity which looks very much like the one I have here, except that now m of t moves when I change the control. Okay, so the real difference between what is written here and what is written here is the fact that as soon as I change the control, I change, of course, x of t, which solves the same stochastic differential equation as above, okay, and therefore I change the law. Okay. The constraint, the dynamics on the constraint is exactly the same, except again that we don't have m of t, which was fixed above, okay. We have the law of x of t, okay, which moves with the control. So this one is a Maclaurin-Delorme equation. The first one above was just an ordinary stochastic differential equation, knowing that m of t was given. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, and now there are two ways to handle the problem. As far as I know, there are a way involving, as usual, when you do optimal control problem, you can write dynamic programming principle. So the first thing I'm going to describe is dynamic programming principle and PD technique. Okay, so they will involve a kind of master equation in the space of measure. And the second way we can see the problem is to write the optimality condition. So the PD technique was the one that was described by Mehdi yesterday in his talk, for instance. Okay? So let me start with the PD techniques. The reason why I'm talking about that, it will involve the master equation in a more transparent way. Okay, so you have an optimal control problem to solve, okay, but it's written for an initial condition, which is at time 0, I want to be equal to z naught, okay, and then you have to leave that to more general initial time and initial condition. So it will be more transparent if I write everything in terms of measure. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to translate this problem into pure unit deterministic terms, so in terms of measure. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm sure that most of the people in the audience are probabilists, and I'm more PD guy, so I understand things when there are PDs. So this is the reason, when there is no expectation. So this is the reason why I'm translating everything in terms of deterministic quantities. But here, the problem becomes really deterministic, okay? So we minimize over the control alpha, which will be distributed, okay? It depends on time and space now. The quantity, so instead of expectation, I'm writing the integral over RD against the law, okay? So m of t would be the law of x. So I just rewrote the first expectation, writing m of t for the law of x, okay? And the stochastic differential equation becomes the Kolmogorov equation in this setting. Okay, saying that you have a process which satisfies stochastic differential equation is more or less equivalent to say that its law satisfies the Kolmogorov equation. With an initial condition and 0 equals the law of Z naught. Okay, and the dynamic programming approach is just to say that I'm going to change, so here's I'm going to change the initial time and the initial position and to solve the problem for any initial time and any initial position. So the initial time, instead of 0, I'm looking at t naught, which is between 0 and capital T. And instead of L of 0, I'm looking at m bar of 0, okay, which is another initial condition, which is a probability measure on LT. Okay, let's say it has a first order moment. And this gives me a value function which depends on the initial time and the initial position. Okay, and using this value function, what we can do exactly as in yesterday's talk is to write the dynamic programming principle for this quantity, okay, which becomes, now you see that everything is deterministic, okay? Of course, if you have common noise, you should have something which is, this would be random, but here we don't look at problems with common noise. Okay, so the dynamic programming principle is exactly as usual, okay, I guess it's not difficult to see. So the dynamic programming principle just says, and again, there is no difficulty here because everything is deterministic. It says that if you take any h between t naught and capital T minus t naught, then u of t naught n bar is what you get when you play optimally between t naught and t naught plus h. So you have the running cost. Okay, exactly as before. And at terminal t naught plus h, you see where you are and you play optimally. So you arrive at cosine t naught plus h, and you arrive at a position which is m of t naught plus h. Okay, so this is, of course, the m depends on alpha. Okay, so this quantity is. Okay, so you can do dynamic programming principle. So if you were in discrete times, this would allow you, in principle, to solve, to find the value function. Okay, in continuous time, the way to handle that is to write down the equation satisfied by capital U. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do now, to write in a very informal way what kind of equation we can expect on capital U. So you see that this function U depends on the time, okay, but also on the measure. So this leads very naturally an equation in the space of measure. Okay. So there is nothing to be afraid of because I'm going to do everything completely formal, so it's completely transparent. So in order to do that, I have to say a couple of words for what is the derivative of function in the space of measure. So knowing, of course, that what I'm going to say would be true if the value function was smooth, but as usual, the value function is not smooth, and you have to go to the notion of viscosity solution for Hamilton-Jacobi equation in the space of measure. But I won't enter into that, it's too complicated, okay? But just to tell you how to derive the equation, and to manipulate a little bit this kind of equation in the space of motion. So the first thing we want to do is to take the derivative of a function which depends on the measure, and what are we going to do for that? Well, it's just relatively easy. We are going to make some variation, as Mehdi explained yesterday, on the measure. Okay, so we are going to shift the measure a little bit, and to see what is the leading term if we shift it a little bit. Okay, so this has been discovered in plenty of instances, and for instance, I've seen something in actuarial science where this was done, okay, and the idea was to shock the measure against a Dirac mass, okay, and to see what you get. So this is more or less what I'm going to do. So I won't restrict myself to Dirac masses, but it's really the same kind of idea. So we look at a function, let me call it v. And let's say it goes into R, but you can do whatever you want. Okay, and we want to say something about this derivative, and we are going to look at this flat derivative in the sense that we are going to do as if the space of rho bar, which is here, which is a convex set, but which is of course not a linear space, was flat. I mean, it was a really linear space. Okay, so somehow we look at the space spanned by T1 of M. Okay, and then you can look at. So we say that. Okay, so the derivative will be a function which I denote by. The flat derivative will be the function that I denote by delta u over delta m, and it's going to be a function which goes from T1 to Rd times Rd, so it's a, okay, so this is a functional space, okay, and when you take derivatives in functional space, you get extra variable, okay, exactly like that, okay, so in other words, the derivative is a differential operator, okay, so okay, and which is continuous and bounded. And which has the following property. It has a property that if you look at u of m prime minus u of m for two different measure n and m prime, what you get is the usual expansion. Okay, so I'm going to write the fact that the derivative is the integral, the function is the integral of its derivative. Okay, so I look at this object along the path between m prime and m, so the segment between m prime and m, it can be written by 1 minus m plus t m prime. Okay, so when t goes from 0 to 1, okay, you go from m to m prime. Okay. And I integrate that against the difference between m prime and m. Okay, so my sentence makes no sense. So we say that u has a flat derivative which is delta u over delta m if you have this quantity. Okay? I'm sorry, I started my sentence extremely badly. So what do I mean? Okay, so we say that a function u is C1, and if there exists an object like that, okay, which is continuous and bounded, and such that you have this equality. Okay. So let me give you a trivial example, which is really trivial. Look, the linear case. So assume that u of m is just an integral over d of function phi. Okay, then the flat derivative is completely transparent because this is already linear. Okay, and you can guess that if you look at u of m prime minus u of m, what you get is precisely the integral of phi m prime minus m. So, as it is a linear object, the flat derivative is the function itself. Okay? And it doesn't depend on m because it's just linear. Okay, so let me put some quotes here because this definition does not really make sense. You can see it because as m prime and m are probability measures, they have the same mass. And so if I add a constant to the delta u over delta m, I don't change this quantity. Okay? And so you need something else to say, to define it in a unique way. Okay, so we don't care. I mean, so it should be, this is the correct expression plus a term which depends on your name. Okay? So there is another object which will play a role, and we will see it appear in just a moment, which is what is called the intrinsic derivative. So remember just that the flat derivative somehow is defined up to a constant, okay? Which is related to the fact that it's defined up to an integral between against a measure which has zero average. And in fact, what we will see appear is what is called the intrinsic derivative. So this one is easy to manipulate in terms of computation. The intrinsic derivative will appear in all equations. Okay? So it's just what is called dm of u. So now it's a vector. It's kind of gradient, if you like. It's a kind of gradient in the space of measure. And it's just the gradient with respect to the x variable of delta u over delta u. Okay. I don't comment that now. Okay, it's a gradient one means when we do optimal transport problems. So for instance, if you want to see how we take derivatives in the space of measure and look at objects like that, you can see Ambrosio Gil Savare book, for instance. Okay, and this kind of derivative has also been introduced in some slightly different way by Lyons in this course of Collège de France. Okay, so now we know a little bit how to take derivatives in the space of measure, and we will see how these derivatives pop up when we use the dynamic programming principle. So I'm going to do it very fast, okay, but the derivation is standard. What I'm going to do is to look at the dynamic programming principle to expand u in terms of to expand the expression which is on the right, okay, and to see what I get. Okay, so I'm going to do that very formally, assuming that u is as smooth as I want. Okay, it has as many derivatives as I want to look at the equation and to try to understand what means the equation. Okay. So I'm looking at the Hamilton-Jacobi equation in the space of measure. Okay, so for doing that, as I said, okay, you have this object you want to expand it, okay, and I'm mainly concentrating on the last part because this one is clearly, when h is small, okay, it's clearly of the size of h times this quantity. So we look for h small at m of t naught plus h, m of t naught plus h. Okay, so clearly, the first approximation is what you get when you take h equals 0. And when h equals 0, by definition, m of t naught is m bar naught, okay, as I wrote above. And then you look at the first order terms, okay? Okay, so the first order term, there are two parts, okay? There is a variation in time, which is just the time derivative of u. And then there is a variation in space. Okay, and here we need to be a little bit careful. And we are going, so let me do the variation in space as if I didn't have a time dependence. So we are exactly in this situation. Okay, so if I don't have that, which is taken by this quantity, okay, I can write the definition. Okay, so what I get is that this is the integral between 0 and 1, the integral over Rd of delta u over delta m, and there are plenty of terms here. Okay, so let me forget about these terms, which, as h is small, converge to m bar naught, okay, which is the value of that guy when h equals 0. So it's something which should depend on some parameters that I shouldn't have written called t here, but I'm going to call it s, not to mix up things. Okay, and there is this extra variable against which I'm integrating. Okay, so, and then here I've got m of t naught plus h minus m of t naught by integrating space. And then there is a ds for the variation. Okay? So I need to handle a little bit this term, and I'm going to do that very formally, and in this way you will see how the intrinsic derivative appears. No, I'm a little bit optimistic, so I need another board because it won't fit. Okay, so I want to expand the right-hand side, okay, to show you the various terms which appear there. So this quantity, okay, so this is the difference between the two m's, and if m was a smooth solution of the, where is it? It's written here, okay, so as a smooth solution of the Kolmogorov equation, it would be the integral in time, okay, so it would be the integral in time between t naught and t naught plus h of its derivative. Okay, so this is what I'm writing here. I'm going to write the derivative of m, and the derivative of m is a half of Laplacian m minus the divergence of b with all its parameters times n. I'm lacking letter D, let's call it dr, the time. Okay, so now you see that when you have this quantity, okay, yeah, so there is a mistake here. There is no path apparently this. So clearly this quantity is of order h, okay, and to see how to write that in terms of u and with no derivative on m, I'm going to do integration by parts. Okay, so I'm going to pass the Laplacian here onto this function and the divergence here onto this function. Okay. So so this is more or less. Okay, I'm doing as if all the quantity here was fixed in time. So this is more or less h. And as I said, if the quantity here is which stabilized to m bar of m naught, okay, this quantity won't depend on the parameter which is here, which was t. Or S. Okay, so I can forget about this term also, because what is here is almost equal to m bar naught. Okay, and then I'm doing integration by parts to get rid of the derivative on the m measure, on the measure m in these two terms. Okay, so yes, go ahead. Ah, okay. Okay, so for the Laplacian, I'm doing double integration by parts. So it gives me the second order derivative of the, so it will give me T2 x, in fact the trace of delta u over delta m. Okay, and for this one, I put the derivative here, so I've got the derivative of x, delta u over delta m. Okay, scalar b, and here m was missing, and the half was missing. Okay, I don't know if it's clear, but okay. And here you see plainly that what pops up in the story is not the flat derivative, but always the derivative in space is the flat derivative. Okay, so this is the reason why that guy is nothing but a half of the divergence. So this guy should be the divergence in space of dm of u. Okay, times m. So that's the first part, okay, that I rewrite in terms of intrinsic derivative instead of flat derivative. And the second part is just the intrinsic derivative, scalar bm. Okay, so I'm almost done with my Hamilton-Jacobi equation. So what you see is that when you have expanded, where am I? Yeah, it's here. So I've expanded this term, okay, and I find, so when I expand this term in h, I find this term, of course, okay, which is going to simplify, plus h times the time derivative of u, plus this object, okay? Time h. So I simplify by h as we do as usual, and what we get is the following. So coming back to the dynamic programming principle, we get 0 because the u of t naught m bar naught simplify. Okay, we simplify by h, and what we get is that we have the integral over Rd of L times R bar naught plus the time derivative of u plus this term. Okay. Okay, so I'm doing a mistake. Sorry about that. there is still, so here the optimal control was fixed, okay, so there is still an infimum over the optimal control. There is still an, sorry, the control was fixed, so there is still an infimum of the control. And where is the control? The control is in L, okay, and this control which depends on space, so it's here in L and here in B also, okay? So when you rearrange things, but really it's the same computation you do when you derive in a classical optimal control way, in a classical optimal control, the Hamilton-Jacobi equation. It's exactly the same kind of computation, except you do it in the space of measure instead of doing it in infinite dimensional space. Okay, so to point out that this is a backward equation with a terminal condition, I'm going to put everything on the left, okay, and to get minus dtu. This term does not depend on the control, so let me put it here, which is a kind of derivative in the direction of the Brownian motion, okay, so this is the impact of the Brownian motion on the story. And then there is a Hamiltonian, okay, which is the infimum over alpha of that term plus that term, okay? So it's going to be a maximum over alpha of minus that term, okay? And you can see that as the control alpha is distributive, okay, you can plug this infimum inside the integral because alpha depends on x, and so you can minimize x by x, okay? So for this reason, what you get is the integral over Rd of, it becomes a sub, I put everything on the left, over A of minus L with all these variables, where there is A here, okay, minus dmu, scalar times R bar naught, okay, here it was, when h equals 0, it's R bar naught. Okay. And so what you find again is our usual Hamiltonian. Okay, the Hamiltonian we saw in the first board. Okay, and everything is equal to 0. I put all of this is equal to 0. So this gives me my Hamilton-Jacobi equation, where the diffusion term is here, and the Hamiltonian is this one, okay? And you have a terminal condition, which is as usual, because I choose the zero terminal condition, 0. Okay, so you can do a viscosity solution theory for that, and this was done, for instance, by Lyons a long time ago, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. It's a generalization of the Hamilton-Jacobi equation in space, or in infinite dimensional space, but taking into account the fact that you are not in vector space, you are in we are in a convex subset of infinite dimensional space. Okay, so I stop here. You probably didn't learn much except the form of the equation, which is more or less interesting. So I don't know if we learn a lot of this transformation, but in fact, the reason why I show you that is the fact that the master equation in midfield game has quantities which looks very much like that. Okay, so this equation is a kind of parabolic equation in space of measure. The master equation is not; it's hyperbolic. Okay, but it has very similar terms. So if you see it, you will recognize some of these terms. Okay, so this is the main interest of this approach, as far as I know. Okay, so let me change a little bit the point of view and go back to the necessary condition. So the optimality condition for my problem, because it's much more related to what we explained before. Okay, so there were two approaches to the optimal control problem of Mac-Inverse of equation. The dynamic programming principle and the Hamilton-Jacobi equation that I just showed now. And now let me concentrate on the optimality condition. The good point is that the optimality condition will also involve a derivative in the space of measure, so that this notion is already introduced. Okay. Okay, so I remind you the problem we meet, and I'm going to relate it directly in terms of indeterministic term. Okay, so we want to minimize over alpha the integral between 0 and t, integral over Rd of the cost okay, so this is our usual quantity under the constraint that M solves the Kolmogorov equation. Okay, and this is the kind of problem I want to solve. Now, writing the optimality condition. Okay? Okay, so to simplify my life, I'm going to assume that B has a very simple form, that it's just, B is just the control. So from now on, just to avoid taking derivative of B with respect to the measure and blah, 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 let me assume that B, which should be a function of space, control, and measure, is just the control. Okay? And the control takes its values in Rd. So I do that because the expression would be slightly less horrible if they may. Okay, so we want to write optimality condition here. Okay, and the way to do that is it's very easy. You look at variation of the optimal control. So you assume there is an optimal control, which is not trivial. Okay, we have to prove. You have to explain that, and then you take you look formally at the derivative of the cost. So the cost here, I call it G of alpha. You look at the derivative of the cost at the optimal cost in some direction, and you try to understand what you get. Okay? So let me give you the result, comment it a little bit, and then try to give you some hint of how to derive that. So I'm going to assume that there is an optimal control. Okay, again, it's not, getting an optimal control is not completely obvious. Okay, because the quantity, I mean, there is nothing linear in our story. So I'm sorry, from now on, since I'm assuming that B is equal to A, okay, I should have divergence of MT alpha instead of MT beta. No. Okay, so you can see it's absolutely non-linear, it's non-convex problem, but there are ways related to optimal transport which allow to transform the constraint into a linear constraint, and then assuming that L is sufficiently convex in respect to alpha to have the convexity of L with respect to the parameters, to the control parameters. So when you have linear constraint and convex cost, okay, you can expect to have minimizers. Okay, I won't do that. It's a little bit technical, but it's relatively standard, and you use optimal control techniques, optimal transport techniques to do it. So let me assume that you have a minimizer, okay, and write down the optimality condition. So you have the following theorem. And there are some assumptions. Okay, if alpha star is a minimizer, and if M solves the Kolmogorov equation with alpha star, let me call it M star. So it's a specific solution to the Kolmogorov equation. Okay. So I've got alpha star, which is my control. I've got the corresponding state variable now, which is a measure, which evolves in time. Okay. And I want to write what are the optimality conditions. So here you see you've got an optimal control problem with you've got an optimization problem with a constraint, which is the equation. So not surprisingly, what will pop up is Lagrange multiplier. And this Lagrange multiplier, I'm going to call U, it's U. Okay? Then there exists U. Let me call it U star for a while, and then I'm going to forget about the stars, which is a function of time-space, which satisfies the following equation. So it satisfies actually a Hamilton-Jacobi equation, the same Hamilton-Jacobi equation as we saw before. Except that there is an extra term, okay, which is okay, there is an extra term, and the extra term is the following. It's related to the derivative of h respect to the measure n star. Okay, so it's delta h over delta n star. That we integrate against it. Okay. So this term, I will explain it in a moment because it's a little bit mysterious. Okay, so, but it involves the derivative of the Hamiltonian respect to the measure. Okay. So you have your usual Hamilton-Jacobi equation plus an extra term, which, okay, it's horrible, but at least it exists. Okay. So this Lagrange multiplier, and of course your M star satisfies the Kolmogorov equation. Okay, so there is nothing new here. And in fact, you can, and in fact, the alpha star, we're going to see that alpha star is nothing but minus du star. Okay, so you characterize the optimal control by this Lagrange multiplier U. Okay. Like that. So in this case, of course, you can replace alpha star, the optimal control, by du, and you get U star, U star. And of course, you've got the initial and terminal conditions. And U star at time terminal t is again equal to 0. Okay, so it's very strange because you started with an optimal control problem and you end up with something which looks very, very much like the PDE system, the mean field gain PDE system I wrote from the start, except for this term. Okay. Okay, so it has basically the same structure, except that you have this term. Okay? So now if you look at this term, if you look at this term as given, okay, if you call it beta of Tx, if you assume that it's given, so you solve your optimality condition, okay, you find the beta, okay, assume that now you look at this system as if this beta was given, then it's a midfield game system, okay, so it's this system is a midfield game, so it's completely decentralized, okay, so which means somehow that this quantity, if you plug it in a decentralized way in your problem, it can be solved in a decentralized way, so it corresponds to a mean-field game equilibrium. Okay, so you are the global planner, you want to optimize something, okay, you write the necessary condition, the optimality condition, you find the U star, okay, you find the optimal path. It turns out that if you give beta to the controllers, they can compute their equilibrium as if there was no global planner, as if they were acting in a decentralized way. So this term can be understood as incentive. Okay, so this is the link between the two approaches. Huh? Here I'm in a mean-field game control, okay, but in the end, I'm in mean-field control, but in the end, it boils down to a mean-field game somehow. Okay, so let me briefly explain you how this works, how you can derive this equation, okay, I'm going to be very fast for those of you who want to fill the gap. So what I want to explain here is just how to derive formally a system like that, okay, so that you can recover. The rigorous proof of such a theorem is difficult, and you need to develop techniques which are typical in optimal transport, for instance, okay? So I won't enter into this detail. I just want to point out how guess the result, okay? So the idea, as I said, is to make some variation, okay? So I'm going to replace my optimal control alpha star. I replace it by alpha star plus H beta. Okay, so I make this change. So when I do that, the trajectory M is going to change. Okay, and here I'm cheating. Okay, it's going to change like some variation mu. Okay, mu is the variation of, so it should be mu H, okay, in principle. And if I change the control, I should, and I'm doing as if there was no mu H, no dependence of mu respect to H, okay. And now I look at the equation satisfied by M to guess the equation satisfied by mu, okay. So the linear part is completely transparent, so you have that. So this linear part, of course, you recover it on mu, okay, by eliminating what is satisfied by M star. Okay, and then you have the divergence term, okay, which is a quadratic term, okay, it's the divergence of M times the control, okay, and you expand it, ignoring the quadratic term in H. Okay, so what you get is plus divergence of alpha star mu, okay, and so it's quadratic, so that now you get two terms, okay, so it should be the product between this and this, in fact, okay. So I'm neglecting the term, the term in alpha star, M star have gone because of the equation satisfied by M, okay, and I'm looking at the first order terms in H, and what I get is these two terms. Okay, and since I keep the same initial condition for M, okay, the mu must be 0 at time 0. So this is my first part. Okay, so and now let me compute the variation of the cost, which must be 0 by optimality. Okay, so I have 0, which must be equal to J prime computed alpha star in the direction beta. Okay? And here again, it's completely transparent because the cost is explicit. So it's given by the integral. So we look at the cost, which is here, okay? So there will be two parts. So there will be three parts, okay? Because alpha is changing, m is changing, and m is changing again, okay? So I've got dl over dA times m for the times beta times m, which is the variation of L respect to the control, okay? So, and then there is a variation of L respect to m, which is this integral term. In fact, this is the one which is responsible for this one, okay? So, but we integrate against the variation of, we integrate against the variation of m, which is mu here, okay? And again, it's multiplied by m. And finally, there is the variation of m itself, so it's m L times mu, okay? So what we know is that for any control beta, so any variation of the control beta, if I look at the equation satisfied by that guy, okay, which is more or less the first order variation of the measure, okay, this quantity must be 0. Okay, and to exploit that, the classical argument is to introduce the adjoint equation to that problem in order to get rid as much as possible of the mu term, okay, and to keep only beta terms. Okay, so you look at U, solution to the equation which is the dual equation of that guy, okay? So you forget this term which depends on beta, which is nice because it depends on beta. And you write on the dual equation of that guy, okay? And here you look at the term which depends on mu, which are here, okay? And which are the term which will be the right-hand side of my equation. Okay, so so the dual equation of that guy is this one, okay, plus alpha star du. So this is the dual equation of this part of this is the dual operator of this part, okay? And then I want to get rid of mu, okay? So I'm going to put in the right-hand side of that thing what is in factor of mu, okay? So which is the integral over d of dl over dm times m plus, okay, so this part which is multiplied by m I put here, plus the L which is here. Okay? And then it's becoming really late. So the idea is to replace that part by what is here, okay? Once you have that, you use the equation satisfied. So I'm replacing these green terms all this term in green, I'm replacing that by that, okay? So when you do that, you get this expression, which is integrated against mu. And this is the place where the fact that I use the dual equation for mu, of mu, which plays a role, because when I'm going to integrate by part, okay, I'm going to use this equation. Okay, I don't know if it's clear, but when you integrate this by mu, okay, so you get what is here, okay, and so, and on the other hand, when you integrate this by mu, by integration by part, all the terms, I get this quantity times u, okay? So what I'm saying is that what it gives me So when I integrate the equation of u by mu and I do integration by part, okay, you see that what you get is that the integral, you have the integral between 0 and t, the integral over Rd of u times what remains of the equation for mu, okay, which is just the minus divergence n star beta. And then, okay, so I got rid of the green terms, okay, by doing that. And what remains also is the dl over dA against time beta. And this is equal to 0, whatever beta. So this kind of magic allows me to get rid of all the mu terms, okay, and to have now an expression which is only depending on beta, and which is must be 0, whatever beta. So which means that, in fact, when you do integration by part, okay, so this guy, when you do integration by part, it's the same as m star come back, there is a mistake there. Okay, so it's m star du times beta, okay, plus dl over dA times beta. Okay. And in fact, there is a m here. I forgot it. When I wrote the beta term here, where is it? Yeah, no, dl of, okay, it's there over there. Okay, so, except that it should be written as m star. So what it says is that you have the integral of this term, okay, against beta, which must be 0, whatever beta. So what it implies is that this is 0. Okay? And once you have that, it's relatively easy to deduce that du must be dl over minus dl over dA and so on. Okay. Okay. Again, I didn't want to give you too many details. If you are interested, you just complete the computation. It's not too difficult. Okay, so I'm done. So what I wanted to do in this introduction is to show you the typical structure of the equation we meet in midfield game, and to show you the relation between midfield game and midfield control. So I gave you an example of relation by seeing how the incentive appears when you write the necessary condition, the optimality condition for the midfield control to pop up, to come down to a decentralized problem of midfield game type. This is just an example. There are plenty of other examples in which, for instance, you look at crowd motion in which you prevent people to be too crowded, so you have a density constraint. And again, there is a multiplier which appears, which can be interpreted as an incentive and so on. So this is really a quite general fact for this kind of problem, and I'll stop here.